Hello, and welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies, I guess, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
That intro is amazing. My name is Megan. Oh, I don't go next. I'm so distracted.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry.
No worries. I was actually just going to let you go because I was like, that's probably easier than
That's cool.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, hi, I'm Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of Your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast, and in case you wanted to know, my pronouns are he, him.
And my name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network, co-host of the Slashers podcast. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and a member of Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
Salute. Okay, folks,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to break this down real quick and then we can move on from it. Just having a little sleeping child problem tonight. So I'm a little off and I threw off the rhythm at the beginning of the show. So we're going to move past that now. And I knocked up Henry with about 16 cc's of Thorazine, so he's going to take a little nap now. I didn't. That's a line from Ghostbusters, but I got the cc's wrong. So this week, we are talking about movies like we always do, and we want to mention that over on our Patreon, however, we are talking about an entirely different movie. We are talking about the Shane Black written, Rennie Harlin directed 1996 action comedy thriller The Long Kiss Goodnight, starring Gina Davis and Samuel L. Jackson in his fifth movie of 1996. It is a lively conversation about a movie that is, quite frankly, fucking bonkers. So if you're a patron, please go check that out. And if you're not a patron, please consider becoming one. And while we are at it, talking about Patreon, we'd like to spank our sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, when this show is over, I'm going to retire. So I wanted to say, let's thank our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs. Thank you. Oh. We're not stopping.
Heather.
We're powering through. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather.
All right. So now that I have just completely turned the show into who knows what, this week is our serious week. We're talking about the big movies at the end of the year.
Yep.
We'll talk about more serious movies on other shows, but this week we actually have a movie that is so serious it's 3 hours and 20 minutes long. That's right. It's The Brutalist, starring Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones and Guy Pearce. And we are also going to be talking about NOSFERATU, the vampire, written and directed by Robert Eggers. Nobody in the movie sounds like that, by the way.
No one really did accents for this one. At
Yeah.
least not that I remember.
No. Bill Skarsgård did.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did major accents.
Major mustache,
the
too.
main players.
Major mustache, major
Yes.
makeup, major everything.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, we will talk about that.
But we will talk about NOSFERATU in a moment. Now we're going to talk about The Brutalist, which is directed by Brady Corbett, written by Corbett and Mona Fastfold. Like I said, stars Adrian Brody. Where's that guy been? Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, Stacey Martin, Alessandra Nivola pops up for a little while as a feckless cousin. Isaac de Bancolé is in it, who I always like to see in a small role. So anyway, here's your one sentence. Let me count. Yep, one sentence IMDb summary. When visionary architect Laszlo Toth and his wife Erzsébet flee post-war Europe in 1947 to rebuild their legacy and witness the birth of modern America, their lives are changed forever by a mysterious, wealthy client. Well, that's underselling things.
Yeah, I'd say so.
We often talk on this show, or at least make passing reference to how I like long movies where nothing happens. Well, let me tell you, folks, this is a long movie where lots of things happen. Lots and lots of things. Yep. And it is, it's something else. How do we even break this down? Basically, Laszlo is a Hungarian Jew. He has survived. I can't remember which camp he was in. I remember his wife was at Dachau. He was in Bokenwald. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was at Dachau.
Yep. he has made it to the United States. She has had to stay behind in Austria? Is that what it was?
I think you said the Austrian border was
Right.
where she was.
She can't get out for reasons I don't think are ever quite explained, except for I'm going to go with money.
Yeah, it seems like money fixes it.
Yeah. And he also has a niece over there, his sister's daughter. His sister died in the war. And so he makes it to the United States, and his cousin, who is, they call him the American cousin, but I think that's just because he's been in the United States so long. He's actually also
Right.
Hungarian, right?
Right.
Like, yeah.
But he's very much assimilated, so much so that he's
Yes.
married a Catholic woman and says we're Catholic. So.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if that's like I converted or I never told her I'm a Jew. I'm not sure which of those it is.
It struck me as converted, but
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's not entirely clear.
Yeah, and his wife, whose name I think is Audrey, right, is like distrustful of Laszlo, like instantly.
Yep.
Just kind of shitty to him, and Attila is the cousin's name, and he's giving Laszlo a place to sleep, which is just in a shed or whatever it is, but it's better than nothing. And he's working in it. He has a furniture shop. They make furniture, and Laszlo's there to like make nicer stuff, which he says.
Right.
He's like, well, you didn't tell me what you think of the furniture, and he's like, well, it's not very good. And so he starts making brutalist furniture. Brutalism, I had to look this up, is an architectural style. I actually knew what it was. I didn't know that's what it was called. You might call it lots of right angles and concrete, or smooth sides and concrete. Concrete plays a large role in brutalist architecture.
But to be fair, they never say the term brutalist
right.
or brutalism or anything like that in the film.
Right. I had, going into this, I had thought like the brutalist, oh, this must be about some like torture in, one of the camps. No, it's just the name of the architecture.
Yep.
And Laszlo's a renowned architect. Articles were written about him back in Europe before the war. Lots of his buildings have survived the war sort of miraculously. And he has, what else is going on with him? He's got this nose injury. He broke his nose jumping from a train during the war, and he has become addicted to heroin to dull the pain from his injury.
Yeah, and psychic pain, I would argue.
Psychic pain, probably true. And he's working for his cousin. His cousin knows this American, Harry Lee, and his father, Harrison Van Buren. And Harry, the son, says, hey, Laszlo, or rather Attila, bring your cousin, and we're going to like come to my dad's house, and we're going to like refurbish this room here. We're going to turn it into a library. He's a big reader. He loves to read, and we want to make this a library. And they're like, great. And they say, that'll be $2,000. And he's like, I said $1,000. He's like, no, it's going to be $2,000. And so it's $2,000, and they're doing the thing. And then dad comes home early, and it's Guy Pearce. And he's like, what the fuck is this? You motherfuckers! You're fucking up my house. You fucking suck. Get the fuck out of here. There's a black guy in my yard.
And except for all the fucks, that is extremely accurate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right.
He's
up
like,
there.
my mother is dying. She needs to go to bed now. Yeah. I mean, I think
grade A asshole.
Yeah. I mean, what a character introduction. And I also have to say, Guy Pearce has become one of my favorite actors over time, working actors, I should say. And even though I love Guy Pearce, I will be the first to admit there is always some Guy Pearce-ness to his performances. He is not one of those actors who disappears into a role generally. He goes 90% in. But I mean, you see Edward Exley, and then you see the guy in The Rover, and then you see the one with Tom Hardy where he gets his throat cut. I don't remember what that movie's called.
And always just a little bit of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Always just a little bit of Priscilla. But in this, I'm telling you, he by and large disappears into this role. Like, I knew it was him because I know he's in the movie and I knew which character he played. But I'm like, this is very different for him. And I thought he was excellent. But basically, the movie just goes through the next, is it 20 years, 25 years of Laszlo's life as he tries to bring his wife, Erzsébet, and their niece to the United States, which they eventually do. And this enormous project that Harrison hires Laszlo to design and construct on this enormous piece of property they have near Philadelphia, but in that part of Pennsylvania where there are hills everywhere, which is a lot of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
You get the idea. And just the fucking horrific shit that Laszlo has to keep dealing with over and over, and Erzsébet has to deal with as time goes on. The nose injury, the heroin addiction, which are of course tied together. Harrison being a fucking psycho, which, I mean, you sort of just think, well, he's just a rich asshole who doesn't know anything about being a human because he's a rich asshole. Oh no, it's so much worse.
Yep.
I mean, that scene at the end, I'll just go ahead and just
rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah. Well, first there's kind of a couple of components. There is the train accident that gets a lot of the materials scuttled that for this huge project. And that causes Harrison, because he owns the train company and a couple of men were injured in the accident, that causes him to lay off everybody and just be like, fuck you. I don't have if I got to deal with this in court, I don't have the expense to keep building this. Fires Laszlo and everybody there unceremoniously. Laszlo gets a job as a draftsperson. Eventually the lawyer comes to see him and says, all the things have been settled, come back and finish the building. And Laszlo's like, okay, the marble for this part, I know this Italian guy who ran guns against Mussolini's army in the war. He's a fucking badass, but
Didn't
he also
talk
knows
about personally beating Mussolini's corpse or
He
something
did.
like that.
Yeah. It's like Joey from Friends. My grandma was the third person to spit on Mussolini's corpse. So they go to Italy and they're having this sort of celebration for getting the marble. And there's this woman coming on to Laszlo on the dance floor, and he's sort of entertaining it, but then ultimately decides he's not going to. And he wanders off, and Harrison is watching this whole thing just looking ominous. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? I mean, I know this guy's bad news, but what's going on? And so then Harrison goes looking for Laszlo and finds him in an alley. And I thought that he was just going to think, oh, I'll find him with this woman and I'll use that as blackmail to do something with Erzsébet or whatever. Nope. Instead, lays down next to him on this mattress that is somehow in this alley and rapes him in a show of dominance, which is...
Well, yeah, after an anti-Semitic rant that he goes on.
Yes. Don't forget the rampant anti-Semitism sprinkled throughout this movie.
And racism. I mean, he's been racist to black people, to Spanish people, Italian people. He's been horrible to everyone.
Harrison Lee Van Buren is a horrible, horrible person.
Yes.
And his son's not much better. In fact, his
son is a rapist too.
Right. That's right. You see, there's that
it's alluded.
It's alluded.
Yeah,
you see Zsofia pulling down her sweater, and he's adjusting his pants, and it's just like, oh God.
Yeah.
I'm glad that took place off a screen. Jesus. Except the scene with Harrison and Laszlo takes place right on screen the whole way through.
Right.
And after that, Laszlo, as you might expect, kind of starts to come undone. Fires a guy who's goofing around on the building site, fires his friend Gordon Isaac Tabancole, who's been with him since the beginning. They sort of found each other when they were in a shelter, and Laszlo was like, oh, you have a kid, so I'll come to the soup line early to get extra food and make sure that you and your son have some. And they formed a friendship, and they also became junkies together. Or they continued being junkies together, I should say. And Isaac, that's the actor's name, sorry. Gordon eventually gets off the stuff, which Laszlo does not. And then there's the whole thing with, Erzsébet finally getting there. And it turns out that, her English is flawless because she went to school in England and she's a reporter, and Harrison gets her a job at the New York Times. and just they're all so wound up with this guy, and it turns out that he is evil incarnate. So after that all goes down, Erzsébet, I don't remember, because you don't see the confession, I don't think, when
No,
Laszlo
but
tells her
basically
what
what happens. Yeah, what happens is she's been dealing with like really bad physical pain. I think she said she
Right.
had osteoporosis, which is why she's in a
Yes.
wheelchair.
from
And-
malnutrition, right, during the war. Wasn't
From
that
the
it?
famine, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, which is, oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, being starved in a concentration camp.
Mhm.
So yeah, so she has these really bad bouts with pain, and then she's like out of her pain pills. So he goes and gives her the heroin, and they have this like really high, I don't even know, night. It's like a sex scene, but and we know that we don't really know what's happened between them. But later she's like ODing, so he rushes her to the hospital. And then after it says like, oh, do you remember all that shit that you like said to me, that you confessed, and all the things that we talked about? One of which is obviously that he told her about the rape. So she goes and confronts Harrison at like, she gets out of her wheelchair in a walker and walks all the way up to the house, into the house, while he's like about to sit down and have dinner, confronts him in front of everyone else in the room, calling him a rapist. And then his shitty son grabs her and tries to like throw her on the ground and like assaults her.
Maggie,
he
to her
drags
credit,
her out of the room on the ground, and like the sister is like, I'm so sorry.
she's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, there's one
Yeah.
point where she's trying to like pull her the other way, and it's like,
Right.
that's not going to work either. But then she, it's like she's the one decent, well, aside from, Laszlo and Erzsébet, I guess, she's like the one decent person in this movie. And it's like, how did you get in this family? I don't even get it.
Right.
So, but then Erzsébet actually says during the confrontation, look at him. He has no words. He has nothing to say because he knows it's true. And it's like, ooh, yeah, good point. But then he's like, no, fuck you. That's like bullshit. And I will not be accused of these things anymore. And that's when they throw her out.
And he also insults Laszlo, saying he's a drug addict,
Right.
and all these terrible things about him. And yeah.
So they kick her out, and then Harry, the son, comes back, and he says to the guests, like, hey, don't please, because they're getting up to leave. And he's like, please don't leave. And they're like, no, we're leaving. And your father went to bed. And so Harry goes to look for him, and Harrison has flown the fucking coop. He's gone. You get the impression that he might have drowned himself in the I don't even know what you would call.
He
like
definitely killed himself.
Yeah,
in some way, shape, or form.
The water recirculation that is part of this enormous church, which is, even though it's a chapel and all of these things, Laszlo has actually kind of secretly built it as a symbol of what everyone went through in the Holocaust. Like, the rooms in it are all the same size as their rooms in Buchenwald, except he's made the ceilings higher to sort of symbolize, the hope that you may find if you can look up and see the sun. It's this just horrendously sad. What's that, Megan?
I was going to say, we don't actually know if that's why he did it. That's what Jovia says in
you're
the
correct.
epilogue.
That's what Jovia says.
So, right. So there is a good chance that is what he did, but he's not speaking for himself. So we don't actually know if that's why he did it.
He's there, but he's elderly
Right.
and in a wheelchair himself at that point. Erzsébet's gone. She's died some years ago.
Right. And it's unclear because it's also unclear whether they like stayed together, because it's kind of implied that Zofia says like, I'm going to Israel and I'm, my husband, and we're going to go live there. And they kind of like have a disagreement about that. And it seems like Erzsébet wants to go there. And she says something like, I'm going to go, and like, you can come if you want, but it doesn't seem like he went. It seems like he stayed behind and continued his career. So it's not clear even whether they ended up staying together.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are not definitive and that are not entirely clear, that are alluded to or that are open to interpretation.
Yeah, which I definitely appreciate. Like I said, you never see Harrison's body Although you do hear someone say, like, I found something, or I see
Yeah,
something.
like, Lieutenant, there looks like we found something or something to that effect.
But that's the last it's spoken of.
Right. Right. So even that, even though like you're pretty sure like he did kill himself, we still don't know for sure.
Could just be his fucking hat. I mean, who knows?
It could
Right.
be. I mean, it's probably not. He probably killed himself, but
never comes back around to find out what Attila, why Attila made up this thing. Audrey's wife, Attila's wife, Audrey, tells Attila, hey, this is way back in the beginning. Laszlo made a pass at me. And that's one of many reasons that Attila kicks him out. But it's just like that never comes back around, except for when when Laszlo tells Erzsébet about it. But there's no retribution's not the right word, but there's no
conclusion.
There's no conclusion with
catharsis,
Attila's story, which, okay, I mean, that happens in families all the time.
It does, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It just struck me as garden variety anti-Semitism that she just like hated him and didn't want him around, and probably to some degree thought like, oh, his connection to this, it bothered her because, they have this new life where they're like Catholic Americans and whatever it is that they have going on. I don't know. I'm speculating, but
I mean, I think that's probably fairly accurate. I think if we're assuming that Attila converted for her, which is, I think, what we chose to assume, then that's the reminder that he could go back to being a Jew at any time. And I could, people could find out that I married a Jewish guy, because there is a whole lot of anti-Semitism on display in this movie. So,
well, the fact that she even, because you mentioned this twice, so it's making me think about it, Dave, but like the fact that she offers to have his nose fixed, like sure, he had an injury, but also his nose is arguably an indicator that he's Jewish. So, he might look too Jewish for her.
I hadn't considered that that's why she was offering that, but now it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, that's all of the plot and a little bit of articulation. What did everybody think of The Brutalist? Evan, why don't we start with you?
Guys, you know how I feel about long movies. I'm just kidding. This movie actually had my attention, really. I was engrossed by it. I think it was very unfortunate. So, like, we were watching it, and then we had to pause at a certain point with, like, about an hour left. And then we came back, and I feel like I hated the last hour.
Oh.
I feel like it just, for me, like, I was so engrossed, and I was so into it, and then I felt like the movie, to me, felt like it was building to something that I don't feel like it ever got to. And maybe some of this is colored by the fact that like the most heinous part of the movie like happens in that last hour, the rape scene, and like oh man, I was like really really into it, and then I just felt like the last hour I didn't like hate it, but I just felt like it kind of fizzled for me. And in some ways I agree that it's kind of nice that it doesn't answer everything, but it felt to me like kind of a sudden jump from where we leave things with Harrison has killed himself, and it kind of jumps ahead to 1980 for this like architecture retrospective, and we see lots of like photos of other things that he did in his lifetime at this like celebration of his work, but we didn't get a chance to see any of that middle stuff that happened. So I think that was kind of like my thing, is that I was really into it for until the last hour. I think the performances were great. Really thought Adrian Brody was fantastic. Guy Pearce, fantastic. Felicity Jones, I feel like I don't normally love her, but I feel like she was good in this. And it's an epic movie. I understand why it's 3.5 hours. I didn't feel like I wasted my time on it. I do feel like it was worthy of a long runtime, and you both know that I hate long movies generally, and will often rail against them simply for being long. I didn't have a problem with this one being as long as it was, because I was really engrossed by it. But I think, it's a compelling story, an immigrant story. It is a Jewish story. It's about someone, trying to overcome trauma and fight prejudice to achieve their dreams, and I think that is all very compelling. So I don't know. I would say I liked it. I didn't love it. Like, I don't think I understand why people are like calling this like the greatest movie this year, but it's still a solid watch, and I don't regret watching it. So I think that's where I come down.
Megan.
I like how you said my name so ominously. I think the performances are really fantastic here. I've never been an Adrian Brody fan. And it's funny, Dave, you said, where has he been? He's been everywhere. Like, he's done a ton of movies, a ton of TV. Like,
Yep.
he has always been booked and busy. And I think he's a good actor, but I've never found myself wowed by him the way other people seem to be. I think this is a fantastic performance. I think it's incredibly complex and layered. I think he captures all of the nuances and contradictions within Laszlo really expertly. And I agree with you, Dave. I think Guy Pearce is really fantastic too. He is extremely ominous, extremely chilling.
Yeah.
I think there is very early on, it's very clear he has this obsession with Laszlo right from the start. And even when he's talking to him about how their conversations are really intellectually stimulating, I'm like, there is very much a weird kind of erotic charge to what he's saying.
Oh yeah.
And like, I almost like, so much so I thought that they were going to engage in a queer relationship. But no, he just wants to dominate and be a rapist and be gross and horrible and evil incarnate, like you said, Dave.
Yeah.
And which is very accurate. I think the cinematography is exceptional. I know this was done in VistaVision, which hasn't been done since like 1961, which I think gives it such a great scope. I think the use of space is excellent. The architecture, the production design, all of it is superb. I think the score is fantastic, especially in the opening scene. The opening scene is so claustrophobic and so different than the rest of the film, but it's so tense. Like when we get the voiceover, the narration of Elizabeth's letter along with Laszlo like climbing up to the top of the ship, and then we get that upside down of the Statue of Liberty, which to me is very, I mean, it's very on the nose, but it's also, it very much reminded me of The Godfather, because like you have that long, that like wide shot of the car in the foreground and you have the Statue of Liberty in the background. And I think this is a really exceptional film. But all the things you said, Evan, about, you know, being Jewish and about trauma and identity and kind of all of these things. But I also think it's a really scathing indictment of the falseness of the American dream and how there is no such thing. It does not exist. It is a trap. It is a myth. It is going to bring you nothing but torment, and which is a really sobering and appalling, you know, theme and thesis to have in your film. But I think it's true. There was something really, really compelling that I read in a review at The Nation that praised the film. And one of the things it said was that the critic who wrote the review said was that workers make architecture for rich people, and it's this relationship that often destroys the art within. And then they also were talking about how, quote, the brutalist shows us clearly not only the hypocrisies of good taste as a cover for bad behavior, but the terrible reality of art and architecture is that they so often rely on people and systems that reject and even work to annihilate the very humanity that makes art possible. And that was written by Kate Wagner. And I think that that is something that I will be grappling with for a long time. And kind of speaking to your question, kind of that you posed, Evan, as to why people are saying this is the best film. This is not my favorite film of the year. However, and I've kind of been like thinking about it, like, is this really the best film? And I think there are a lot of pieces here that are exceptional. But I think this question, kind of wrestling with the American dream and the falseness of that, also with kind of wealth disparity, classism, all anti-Semitism, racism, and how these all intertwine. I think that, and kind of the role of the art and artist, and how Laszlo is trying to stay true, whether you believe the epilogue or not, that he modeled this center on the buildings of the camps or not. It's very clear he has a vision, and he's not going to compromise on the vision. Like, we see that throughout. And I can't believe I'm going to make this comparison, but it does remind me of Howard Rourke in The Fountainhead, and how he I know Ayn Rand is a piece of shit. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I know she's such a piece of shit, but I'm like, it's Howard Rourke. He won't compromise on his architecture. And Laszlo refuses to compromise. And so he clearly has a vision. But he's also running up against, commerce and capitalism. And it's that tension. And how do you retain your humanity, and how do you retain being an artist amidst capitalism, that I think is such a fascinating dissection and exploration here. So I think there's a lot to unpack and pick apart and to look at. And I think this film, it's not a subtle film by any means, but it also is kind of, it doesn't handhold its audience either. Like, it's letting you it's letting things percolate, and it's kind of letting you like mull things over. So I think that's a testament to the film and how well made it is. But yeah, I liked this. I think there are a lot of great things that are really compelling about this.
Okay.
But Dave, what did you think?
Yeah, it's kind of a piece of shit. No, it's good.
I was like, I know that's not true.
I think I like this more than both of you. I'm not sure if it's one of the, I didn't see as many movies this year as I normally do. Just 2024 didn't work out that way. But this definitely would have been in my top 10 had I seen it before BAFTA did its voting. And I'm going to piggyback off things that both of you said. I'm going to start with Megan, because this one I remember better. How this is not a subtle movie, which is true. I absolutely agree with that. But I think we were talking about how it doesn't resolve a lot of things. I think how that works is, the screenplay feeds you all this information kind of up front at every scene, and then just lets everything, like, keeps the gate open for you to figure out what everything means from that point.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really, I just think that's a good choice. And I appreciated, it's like, you're being spoon-fed, and now you're not. So, and as far as like the length goes, I kind of agree with you on that, Evan. Like, the first 2 hours are or 2 hours and 20 minutes or so are absolutely fascinating. And the last hour didn't work as well for me, simply because it kind of starts rushing, which a lot of long movies do, because it's like, well, we've got all of this stuff that we did up at the top, and we need to resolve as much of it as we can without seeming like we're, handing you everything on a silver platter. And so after the rape is when everything kind of starts speeding up. But I think maybe the intention there is also to show just like how quickly the spiral can occur after yet another traumatic event.
Yeah. I think that's a great interpretation of it.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. I'm not sure. I think one of the other things that I noticed is, and I only started thinking about this when I saw the big project in Pennsylvania, the project that they were fighting. I don't even know what it's called.
The like community
center,
but it's also a church, but it's also a library. It's
the
like
community
so many
center
things
that no one could get to because it was at the top of a giant hill, and it seemed like there was no infrastructure or roads to get to it.
Yeah.
That was something Shauna was bringing up when we were watching. I was like, yeah, that is a great point. There's like no roads or anything. So are they going to build all the infrastructure for people to use this quote unquote community center?
Right.
Yeah, they're going to have to. So the thing that I was thinking about is, if you believe the interpretation that the rooms are all of the same square footage, at least in the square sense, as the camps, and the ceilings are longer because of this other part of the vision that Laszlo had, I started to realize how much of the movie he is boxed in when he's framed.
Yes.
Just like so much of it. And there are a couple, like he's boxed in when Gordon first finds him in the shelter after he gets kicked out of his cousin's house. He's boxed into that shower smoking heroin.
Right.
But the thing,
in the bunk bed too. He's sleeping in that bunk bed.
Yes.
Remember when you first see him?
Yep.
Yep, that's right.
And the thing I remember though is like things, I have to go back and watch this to see if I'm right, but things kind of start to open up at first when he's with the cousin. Like you see them walking through the store, or the floor of the furniture shop and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the shots are wide, you know, they're in the dead center of the frame. You can see the entire store and it's like, oh, we've gotten to a place where he's feeling lighter. His cousin who he loves is here and he's helping him, and then kicks him out and then everything gets small again. And that happens several times over the course of the movie. And I was just like, this is either the greatest coincidence ever or this is a choice.
Oh, it's a choice.
It seems like a deliberate choice for sure.
So,
I wish I had noticed that as much when I was watching it.
Yeah, well, the first time I really thought about it consciously was when they were sitting in the apartment after they had moved to New York, and Zsofia and her husband are saying, "Oh, we're moving to Israel," and you can it's just a box. That frame is just a box.
It's very
so
tight space.
Yeah.
You're like, actually, they're showing us from like around the corner at first. I think you're kind of peering around the corner and seeing their dinner. You're not sitting at the table with them.
Yep. And
until almost at like the end, then you're like facing them and like,
right.
Yeah, no, great point.
Yeah, and at I thought about it too. Like the assault is a very wide. It's shot wide, probably partially to like take the curse off it a little bit, because if you were close on that would be exceptionally difficult. But also the next day, when they're in the quarry, you know, the quarry should be, all the other establishing shots at this quarry have been fucking huge, but this shows them like hugged up against the marble and, you know, and trying to navigate their way out. And it's just, so I thought
those quarry shots are beautiful, by the way, like especially the opening of it. Like, anyway, sorry, please continue.
I also can't believe that this movie only cost like $10 million. Like, how is that possible?
It looks so good.
It does. It seems like it has a production budget much higher than that, to what you were saying, Megan, about the art direction and the costumes and in the cinematography. It all seems very polished of a movie of a much larger budget.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, I, you know, lately when I've been talking about movies that everybody loves that I don't love, and I'm seeing other movies and I'm like, what is it that tips me off? It's just like, you know, from the beginning, I found the opening scene a little difficult in the ship because it's just so chaotic.
It is very chaotic.
But then,
but it's liked.
But it is. I think it's a good chaotic.
Yeah. But then, you know, 5 minutes later, you're into like what the rest of the movie looks like.
Yes.
And I just found myself swept up in this story's, you know, riptide. I don't know. It had me hooked from the beginning. And it's like, what is it that makes a movie great? It's like, I don't know. It's when you can like watch a movie in 2024 with all these other distractions you have and not pick up your phone or whatever. It's like, if I was trying to watch whatever the next Marvel movie was, I would be on my phone the entire time and watching this out of one eye, you know? And it would still probably be 3 hours. So that's not the greatest explanation I can make, but we've also talked about The Brutalist for a while, so maybe we should move on. What were you going to say, Evan?
No, but I mean, I think it definitely says something about a long movie's ability, especially to be able to capture your attention in a time when there are a lot of distractions. And I think for me, you know, getting back to what you were saying, Megan, about the richness of the themes, like I think it works as like, you know, a straight ahead like narrative about this guy that you want to root for, but then all of the subtext underneath it, layered on top of it, makes it a really rich story that does hold your attention, like you're saying, Dave.
Yeah. And I think I agree with you both that Adrian Brody, this is just such a wonderful performance, just not a false note in it.
No, it's so good.
Yeah. And then Guy Pearce too. There's one scene where I thought that he wasn't as good as the rest of it, but just, I've never seen him do anything like this. It's, you know, I mean, why would you have seen him do anything like this? It's a different fucking movie. But
well, no, but he could play a similar villain and other things. So you're not wrong.
Yeah. Well, do we have any final thoughts about The Brutalist before we move on?
No.
Okay.
Just that I think it's a really great film.
Yeah, I agree.
And you had said something about watching it again. I don't know if I want to sit through 3 hours again, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, I think I might need to watch it again to pick up more things. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, then let's move on to our second and final film of the night. We're going to talk about the new Robert Eggers film, NOSFERATU. In case you're unfamiliar, this is inspired by and adapted from, it's inspired by the 1922 silent film NOSFERATU, which is a German adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, an unauthorized thing, and it's one of the earliest like copyright litigations in history.
Yep.
Very famous. And so now Eggers has remade it, and he's sort of he's taken sort of the aesthetic of NOSFERATU and kept the text largely of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, I say that, of course, not having read Dracula since 1992, when I read it before I saw Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola. So, and I will say, you know what this movie has in common with that movie? The horniness. Oh boy.
Yeah, I haven't even seen that, and I've heard how horny it is in this movie. Yep.
Well, I would never describe Bram Stoker's Dracula as like joyful, but it's definitely sexier.
Yeah, I think joyful is a good description.
Yeah.
There is a joyousness to it. It's a lot of fun. It's nuts.
Well,
that's one of the horniest movies I've ever seen.
Oh, for sure. Certainly like mainstream American movies.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But let's just talk about this I don't think we really need to talk about the story, because it's a pretty straightforward telling, in my estimation, of Dracula. Right down to his name's not Harker because it's, German.
Right, but he's essentially Jonathan Harker.
So Lil-Rose Depp is named Ellie Hooter, but she's Lucy, not Lucy. She's Mina, and Nicholas Hoult is basically Harker, and Bill Skarsgård is Dracula, but he's Orlok. Aaron Taylor Johnson is dope, but he's also he's kind of like a combination. He's like a combination of the Texan and the Englishman from Dracula. Yes. And they sort of leave absolutely. Out the doctor. They sort of leave to Ralph Ineson, because I don't know how. I love Ralph Ineson, and every time I hear that voice of his, I'm like, the baritone is here.
It's iconic.
Yeah. And I think this is a pretty, as far as like the story itself, the direction, as is typical in the 3 out of 4 Eggers movies I've seen. I have not seen The Lighthouse. I keep meaning to, but haven't. This movie,
it's great.
This movie is directed at 100% from the beginning to the end. Now, Does it work for you? I don't know. Let's find out from Megan first, because Evan went first for The Brutalist.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going to talk a little bit about the story.
I mean, we can.
No, it's not a big deal. I mean, basically, yeah, Lil-Rose Depp as Ellen is haunted right from the start. She's haunted from these visions of Orlok, and she's newly married. And then Orlok's coming to town, just like in Dracula. He's coming overseas, gets an old house, and lots of killing, and minions are made. So yeah, it's very similar to that. I think Lil-Rose Depp is excellent in this. I think she's really great. I was surprised because I didn't think she was going to be great, but she's great. I love the cinematography in this, which is no surprise because Robert Eggers films always have exceptional production design and cinematography. They're always visually sumptuous. I love the use of light in this. I love the homage to Murnau's NOSFERATU and the use of German expressionism and shadows. And I think the night scenes look great. I think Bill Skarsgård is very creepy. It's funny. I don't think this is that horny of a movie. And I kind of am sad. I wish it was horny.
I mean,
however, yes.
There is that final shot of his desiccated naked corpse on top of her.
Absolutely. But that, to me, that's not horniness. Sex and horniness are not necessarily the same thing, interestingly, because just like there's a difference between sex and sensuality, to me, this is very much a fascinating depiction of the impending doom and death knell of death, and very much kind of like I took it almost as like an interesting allegory for like an STI. Like in that, like she knows it's coming, she knows it's gonna bring death, and she's welcoming in it. Like she's like, "Yep, can't escape this." And I think that's a fascinating take on the Dracula story. And there's been so many adaptations, so many movies, so many adaptations, and a lot of them are doing the same things. And I think for the most part this is doing a lot of the same things, but I think it's doing some things differently. And I think it's reveling in grossness. I think it's reveling in like the grossness of decaying bodies and of, rats and the throngs of rats. And whereas a lot of other Dracula films and Nosferatu, there is a horniness to them, as we keep talking about, and a sexiness and a luridness to the nature of vampires and vampirism, and it often is used as a metaphor or allegory for sex. I think for here, it's kind of reveling in this destruction and decay and kind of the more somber aspects of the story, which I just found really intriguing. I don't think all the performances work. Like, I don't think Aaron Taylor Johnson is good at all. I don't have a problem with Nicholas Hoult the way you two do, but I don't think he's great here. I think he's like fine, whatever. But I think Lil-Rose Depp really holds everything together, and I think the visuals are striking. And so I really liked this.
I'm going to have to read you what I wrote in my Letterboxd review. But
I know what you wrote, so please do, because it's a good review.
Oh, okay. Well, Evan, why don't you do you first, and then I'll yap at the end.
Okay.
But you should read your Letterboxd review because it's a good one.
Thank you.
Well, I am no fan of gothic horror. I'm not like, it's just, I don't know, it's not really my vibe, but I do have to say the visuals in this movie are very striking. And
for sure.
It is a feast for the eyes. And so, though I found myself kind of just like bleh on the whole thing, because I'm just like, gothic horror, it's kind of moving kind of slow. I really think the visuals are just so interesting to look at, and the art direction is just totally awesome in this. I think, I rail against Nicholas Hoult a lot. I actually thought he was pretty decent in this, believe it or not.
Cool.
I think he did a really good job of looking really fucking scared multiple times in this movie. Like, really fucking scared. Like when he's in that castle and he's standing by the fireplace and Orlok is like, I don't know, he's not like creeping towards him, but he just like suddenly appears in front of him. That he looked really fucking scared. And so I felt like he actually did a really good job in this movie, much as I'm loath to say it. But and I also had a lot of fun when this movie brought Willem Dafoe in for his scenery chewing. And he was just very clearly having a blast with this. Him and Ralph Ineson were quite the pair. I enjoyed their whole vibe they had going on, their whole collaboration, and like trying to figure out how they're going to take down Orlok. So I thought the movie took this kind of like fun, got kind of like a fun bent later in the story, especially when they were kind of talking about the vampirism as like this plague, and they were treating it like a disease that was infecting everybody. And it just had this kind of like really gross, icky kind of vibe to it. So I actually did end up liking it a lot more toward the end and felt like it was really moving at a good clip. And Bill Skarsgård also very creepy. And I liked what you're saying, Megan, about the reveling in the decay, because when you see Orlok, he is gross. He's got all these like festering sores, and he's like this like frail, desiccated looking corpse, but also is weirdly powerful. Like that scene where Nicholas Hoult tears open the coffin and tries to swing the pickaxe at him, and he grabs it from him. And yeah, so Bill Skarsgård, he's creepy and he's good at playing monsters. So I don't know. It was a mixed bag for me. Not a fan of gothic horror. This movie just, I don't know, didn't really do it for me overall, but I liked elements of it quite a bit.
Okay.
The one thing I just want to jump in and say that about the disease element, this is not the first Dracula film to focus on disease, that element of it. I watched a bunch of Dracula films earlier for a podcast that I did. And I don't know if it was Frank Langella's 1958 Dracula or if it was, or not Frank Langella, Christopher Lee's, or if it was Frank Langella's later, but one of them like talks a lot about like the using vampirism as like a disease. So this definitely kind of like takes that idea and runs with it. But yeah, I think it's a fascinating one. So I just
it's fun.
Yeah,
it makes the movie a lot more fun to me anyway.
Yeah, so even though it's not doing anything like groundbreaking in that way, I think it does do something really interesting with that. So yeah, just want to say that. But Dave, what did you think?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I'm glad this worked for you too, because this did not work for me fucking at all. I was amazed. I had really been looking forward to this. And the question that I come away with more than anything is, why now? Like, why are we getting this story now? I mean, you can tell the Dracula story anytime, and it is told anytime, all the time. But why this enormous, ornate, fucking retelling? I just don't understand. And I also don't understand. I mean, there is humor in Robert Eggers' movies, but I feel like most of it is sort of like a byproduct of something else or accidental almost. And the attempt at actually putting humor in this movie, I think, fails so epically. Evan, I apologize. I thought Willem Dafoe was so out of place and horrible in this part. I was just like, I can't believe I'm fucking watching this, and that the director of this movie was like, yeah, you do that. So here's what I wrote in my Letterboxd review. I gave this 2 stars, but I should lower it to 1.5.
Oh no.
I'm beginning to think Willem Dafoe in character roles is a bad idea. Nicholas Hoult and Aaron Taylor Johnson are definitely bad ideas, but not as shit here as elsewhere.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I never thought I'd praise Lil-Rose Depp, but she's a good anchor against the rest of this fucking flailing. I swear I keep watching different movies from everyone else. Like, I found this tedious. I found a lot of the visuals surprisingly inspired by Coppola's Dracula. Like everything in the castle, yeah. I was just like, you got to be kidding me, you know? And of course, so much of it inspired by Murnau's movie, which why shouldn't it be? It's named for that. And I thought that Bill Skarsgård performance was really just kind of boring and irritating, listening to him like fucking drag words out forever in that accent. I just couldn't get into this at all. The only thing, and I can't believe I've seen Lil-Rose Depp in other movies. I'm like, all right, she's fine. She's Johnny Depp's kid, whatever. I really found her compelling, like her choices.
Agreed.
And she has such a kind of a, this is not going to come out right, but kind of an unusual look with those like always sleepy eyes, and just that her skin's not like porcelain because she's not like white like that, but it's just it's like she has one color. She doesn't have like red cheeks like some of us do, but like it's just her pallor, I guess you would say, is like really suited well to this. And her choices and her physicality in this, some of the things that she does with her body in one take, it's like, I can't believe you did that. It's wow.
Yeah, this is a really exceptional performance in showing the like mania or hysteria of a woman, but also not hysteria in the sense of like everything she's saying is true and no one will believe her.
Well,
Right.
that's like the one thing I kind of liked about it was
Mhm.
that there, much like in the novel, if I can recall correctly,
Yes.
there is no explanation for why Mina and Dracula are drawn together. It's not a romantic thing like Francis Ford Coppola and James Hart made it. And it's not just some weird "I want to suck your blood" thing. It's just like they are psychically linked somehow, you know? And over the course of the novel, you don't really fucking care why, because you're just like, I can't believe this is all fucking happening. This is crazy. And especially because it's an epistolary novel, so it's all like letters and journal entries, and it's just like you think it would be kind of like books like that kind of drive me up the wall. I've read Shelley's Frankenstein, but it kind of drives me nuts because it's just like fucking letters. And Dracula didn't do that to me. And it's always been interesting to me how it can be so not easily adapted, but adapted in a just a more conventional storytelling manner when it goes to film. So I guess that's a long way of saying the one thing that worked for me was Lil-Rose Depp's connection, Ellen's connection to Orlok, and the just no reasoning behind why it's happening. It's just happening. And I didn't really think about the whole she's telling people this and they're not believing her. But now that you say that, Megan, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
And like the one person who believes her eventually is her husband. And of course he's too late. And Aaron Taylor Johnson, I don't even know, like, did he, I mean, the thing about the plague is it really is like the plague because he's not like bitten by anything except when he goes to the mausoleum and like opens his entire family's coffins, he's like got the pustules and everything on his face and he vomits blood. And it's like, what did Orlok actually bring the plague? Like what happened here? And I also liked the Renfield character, whatever his character's name was, the stand Canuck. I thought that his performance was fucking batty, and I really liked it.
It was bonkers, for sure.
Oh, and I liked Ralph Ineson too, because I always like Ralph Ineson.
He's always great.
But on the whole, this was just not working for me. I was actually kind of surprised. So, oh well.
I'm actually surprised it worked less for you than it did for me, because I did find it tedious and for a lot of it, and was kind of like, oh god. But I really was enjoying that last act was pretty action packed for me.
Now, Megan, you could correct me, but people tell me that The Lighthouse is actually very funny in places.
Yeah, it's funny.
So I think The Witch is great, but there's like no humor in The Witch.
No.
And there's
I think The Lighthouse is the funniest of his films. Like I think that's like there's an absurdity running through it, and Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are both playing it kind of had it
like broadly,
amped up
right?
at an 11. Yeah. But there's definitely more humor injected into that than in his other films. Like intentional humor.
Yeah, and I think the only intentional humor in The Northman is Anya Taylor-Joy's character, and even that's like slight. And then the unintentional humor is Nicole Kidman just being like, "I'm fucking going for it." You know? And this movie is so serious, it's torture, and it's self-serious, which is even more torturous. So I just couldn't. You disagree?
I do. Well, I also love gothic horror. I love Dracula. I love gothic horror. I love the vibes. I love the creepiness.
I don't dislike gothic horror. I'm all for.
No, but Evan does. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I love gothic horror. Like, I'm just like, I love Robert Eggers. I love his attention to detail. So, and
he is speaking to why he did this.
He is. Yeah. Speaking to why he did this, I think he did this because I've read he was obsessed with this when he was a kid, and he's this Nosferatu, the original, influenced him to be a filmmaker. So I think it was just like a passion project for him. So
look at all that passion on screen. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a great film.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to disagree, you know. It's like,
I wonder if part of it is for you, Dave, specifically, if it was the expectation. Like, I don't know.
maybe, but at the same,
or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you're just not into his films. I don't know.
well, the thing about it is when I had read that is inspired by both Murnau's film and Dracula, obviously, I guess I was just hoping for something different from such a like kind of from a very straightforward retelling. I mean, there are if you have any passing familiarity with the Dracula story, there is nothing surprising in this. So, and that's just kind of disappointing, especially when you get to the castle, and Arlok's castle looks like it could have been Dracula's castle from 1992. You know, shot very differently, but right down to the weird shadows and the ominous, you know, placement of Orlok within the shots, just disappointing. So I will say the specter of his body in the background is effective in places. And it is also effective just that he is enormous. Although you realize lately a lot of it's his collar, but later I should say, but and I also like the mustache choice. Don't know why it's there, but I like it. So that's where I come down on NOSFERATU Dracula.
Yeah, something you said that made me think about this, Dave, and that I do wonder how many people outside of film critics have seen NOSFERATU, like younger film fans.
Probably not many.
And I do wonder if, because, you know, and you're right, when you start watching all of the Dracula adaptations, they all kind of bleed into each other. Like they're doing the same thing over and over and over. And occasionally they'll do some slightly different twist. And I still maintain that the disease component and the decay component is it's a different feel, and kind of the depressing ending is a different feel for this, I think. But I do wonder if this film, because there's so much hype around it, and Robert Eggers is such a great filmmaker visually, I wonder if this will get more people to watch other Dracula adaptations as well as Murnau's NOSFERATU, which that would be a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so, because once I saw the first time I saw Lugosi, the Bela Lugosi Dracula, I was like, so this is the fucking Dracula, huh? I mean, it's fine. And then I read this like, oh, but you should see the Spanish language version, which was shot at night with different actors on the same sets. And I did. And I did. And I was like, this is an entirely different, much better movie, you know? So, and it's horny too.
Telling you, vampires are horny.
All right. Well, do we have any final thoughts about NOSFERATU?
No.
Okay. How about you, Megan?
Nope.
All right. Then we are going to wrap up this episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. And I want to thank my son Henry for not interrupting the main episode like he did the Patreon episode. You can see all these movies in theaters. These movies are in theaters. The Brutalist on today, Friday, and then NOSFERATU comes out Christmas Day. Want to thank our editor, Otto Clammer, for making us sound great each week. Thank you, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. If you want to check us out online, we're spoilerpiece.com. That's our website. On social media, we're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, and we're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and Threads. If you'd like to email us, we're spoilerpiece@gmail.com. We appreciate your comments and everything. And I feel like NOSFERATU and The Brutalist are great candidates for varied opinions. So if you want to send those in, please do. And you can also do that by giving us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail in Count Orlok's voice and tell us why this NOSFERATU is your favorite of the NOSFERATUs or Dracula stories. And if you really, really like the show, please consider rating and reviewing us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece, or you can rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That every little bit helps, kids. And if you really, really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. like we have said several times, we talked about the Rennie Harlin, Shane Black, Gina Davis 1996 thriller, The Long Kiss Goodnight. It is a super lively conversation. Mm-hmm. So please go listen to it if you're a patron. And like I said, if you're not, please consider joining. And my name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can find me on not Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and Blue Sky as Dave Sees Movies.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast. And you can follow me on social media as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
And my name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Opinion-S World or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinion-S.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.